In the series of management consulting, first session was on meaning and scope. Second session was on the process of management consulting. Third session was on ethics. It also covered client relations, cost and fees. And today, the fourth session, we will take a look, a concise look, not a detailed look, on a few caselets and cases related to the area of management consulting. Some of the cases involve management consulting firms themselves as subject of study. Some cases involve something very interesting for management consultants to study. I've included both of them in today's lecture. We will not go into detailed cases. That would call for reading the full case, following the case discussion method, and then taking up the discussion. What I will do today is a top line survey of a few cases. In the process, there will be valuable knowledge and insights to be learned and useful for the area of management consulting. We start with some popular, well-known instances in the area of management consulting. The folklore of management consulting. One belief it proves is that management consulting actually works, and that management consultants also do something meaningful, useful, and make a difference. We start with the first example of IBM. IBM at one point in time used to be one of the largest hardware manufacturers of the world. And it also used to make software. It's like a complete IT company on both the sides, hardware and software. Those who have been in the industry for a long time would still remember IBM Lotus. Before Windows 95 was launched and the graphic user interface became a norm, IBM had its softwares, which were among leading softwares, competing with some of the softwares that others were making. But primarily it was a hardware company. What you see Dell and HP today, IBM was a much larger version of it during its heydays. Then, because of a variety of reasons, IBM started going down. We won't go into the reasons, that's a case by itself. The company board tried a couple of CEOs, none of whom could turn around IBM. And then they took a very radical decision, once in a decade kind of decision, or rather once in a 5-decade kind of decision. And they brought in a consultant from McKinsey, Louis Gerstner, as the CEO of IBM. It rarely happens that a consultant is appointed as a CEO. Usually, the advisory role and the executive roles are classified into two different verticals. Rarely it happens that a consultant is brought into an executive role at the top. We see two examples of it. One is Louis Gerstner in case of IBM, and recently in India, we see Infosys bringing in Salil Parekh, I believe, who was a consultant into a CEO role. Louis Gerstner was able to turn around IBM and refocus the whole company from hardware to a software and services company. And this was a very difficult transformation to achieve. Louis Gerstner was able to save IBM, and his experiences he has put down in a book, very popular book, Making the Elephant Dance. This is a very successful instance of a consultant who has traditionally have had experience of consulting, gets into an executive role and is able to practice what he has been preaching for a long time and turn the company around. And today we see IBM not as a hardware company, but primarily as a software services company. Also a very sharp research-oriented company, thanks to Louis Gerstner. So one very important instance in the history of management consulting, where a consultant could turn around a company and successfully get into an executive role. It also brings home the point that at times when a radical turnaround is needed, you may have to get somebody completely outside the sector to really bring in freshness and originality. And even the best of the sector are not able to turn around a deeply stuck company. Second example we can take is of Toyota system, TPS, Toyota Production System. Sure, write it here. TPS. Late 70s, 80s, 90s, especially in the 80s, as the Japanese automobile manufacturers overtook the big three of USA. Not overtook actually, but were competing fiercely and were snatching market share from GM, Toyota, and Chevrolet. This led to a series of studies by consultants to find out what is it that the Japanese do right and the Americans do wrong in the automobile sector. And one of the outcomes of that period is a very important book, which is a must read for every consultant. And that is the Toyota Way. The book is titled The Toyota Way. And the Toyota Way talks about Toyota Production System, TPS. And it studies how Toyota has been able to grow so fast in the automobile market. And today, of course, Toyota is the world's largest automobile maker. Chevrolet is no more. Ford on the decline. We don't know if it will survive for long. General Motor in deep troubles. So the Toyota Way studies Toyota Production System, and it, at the end of a long study, the author has been able to lay out 14 principles of Toyota Production System, which he believes are responsible for the success of Toyota. And in a generic sense, the logic applies to what the Japanese do right. We will take 3 examples from this book, which I believe will inspire you to go deeper into it. The first example which this consultant has given from TPS is the 5 why system used by TPS. Now, this is almost like a consulting firm trying to solve a problem, because every consulting firm will have its unique way of approaching a industrial problem. In Toyota production system, there is a 5 why system. 5 why means ask why 5 times. And the author gives a very good example of it. He says, once a customer complained that oil is leaking from some part of the engine because the gasket, which is supposed to be the seal, has cracked. So at the surface, it looks as though it's a quality problem of the production department. There is a crack in a component and the oil is leaking. What TPS does is it starts asking why 5 times. So it asks why first time. Why has this quality problem come up? And the answer is because the supplier did not supply good quality material. Second why did the supplier not supply good quality material? Because the company had negotiated hard on lowering the cost and the supplier started cutting corners in quality. Third why did the company ask the supplier to cut on price? That is because the production manager was given a target that he has to reduce cost of production every year by a certain percentage. If he is able to make it, he gets an incentive. If he doesn't make it, he doesn't get an incentive. So the production manager is incentivized to reduce cost but not to enhance quality. TPS tells us that we don't even need to go further. If we ask why 3 times in this context, we already have the answer. We don't even have to ask it 5 times. And the answer is, it is the HR system, the HR incentive policy, which is leading to the quality problem in production. So at the surface, what looks like a quality problem of production department at the roots is a HR policy problem. So the problem has to be solved at the roots. Second principle of TPS, which the author lists out, is JIT, just in time. The author says Toyota believes that if you keep an inventory, it's actually covering up your inefficiency in the flow of the system. So the system from the front has to suck materials into the system rather than there being an inventory where you can just dip into and pick up what you want. Because inventory is a sunk cost, capital is blocked, interest is incurred, and it doesn't add value, and the customer finally has to pay for it, or the company has to pay by lowering the profit. So the inventory is not a value to the company, it is not a value to the customer. So just in time is ideal is not to have any inventory at all, or to go as close as possible to no inventory by having a small inventory. Now this is also a contextual situation. Every country may not have infrastructure and vendors as efficient as the Japanese have. So in many countries, JIT may not be practically feasible. We may try to go near to it, but still be far from where Toyota has reached. But JIT is also one important pillar of TPS, one of the 14 pillars. I have listed the 3 pillars out of 14. Third important concept that the consultant who studied TPS has brought out is stop the flow. Meaning, if there are 3 production lines and in one of the production line, difficulty is faced, some product has not been made properly or something has happened, or a machine has broken down, all the 3 lines are stopped. Until the problem is solved, all the lines are not started or stop the flow. This is counterintuitive because intuition tells you, common sense tells you that if out of 3 lines, one has a problem, let the other 2 go on and the production flow out. But what the stop the flow does is, it forces every problem to be solved on an urgent basis and solved by inclusion of everyone, getting ideas from everyone, involving everyone, and that in turn enhances involvement and knowledge of everyone related to the full system, not just about one's own line. And this generalized enhancement of knowledge helps in many implicit ways which are difficult to quantify. Not to mention the urgency with which the problem is solved by so many heads working on it simultaneously. What stop the flow does is, every problem becomes an urgent problem. There is no problem which can be kept unsolved for a day or a week or a month. The shelf life of the problem becomes very short. And essentially you have a problem-free factory floor for most of the time. So this is a very important study done by a consultant to bring before the world some very important management principles followed by TPS. And the book is a must read for all consultants and especially for those who wish to go into operations or production. Third important case I wish to take up, I should not call it a case, let me just call it an example. The example of the Tata Group, after liberalization, they hired McKinsey to restructure the whole group. And one of the recommendations of McKinsey was to divest Tata Steel. And the Tata Group, thanks to Ratan Tata and his advisors probably, they decided not to divest Tata Steel and keep it as one of the jewels in the crown. And that decision has paid them handsomely. So this is a situation where one of the best consultants, backed with data and some convincing logic, proposes to a group to divest a company. The group rejects the recommendation of the consultant and the group is proven right over a period of time. So nobody is always right. Companies can go wrong and consultants can go wrong. So this is one instance where it was correct to not go by the consultant's advice. Take an opposite case. BSNL, Bharat Sanchar Nigam Limited, government company in India, was going into losses, especially after the advent of mobile phones. And one of the committees appointed by the government suggested, rightly so, to disinvest 30% in the company with controlling rights to a private management firm or any private management party. So any company who wants to invest 30% will manage, government will not manage the company. It was a right decision, could not be taken up because of politics involved. And this is a situation where after a few years, the company is 10 times worse than what it could have been if the suggestion was taken. So this is an instance where not going by the consultant suggestion has taken the company down the drain. Exactly opposite of what happened in the Tata Group. One more interesting example in our context. Reliance split into two, each one brother taking each, and one part of Reliance was Reliance ADAG. and they had to create a corporate identity logo, and they wanted to hire the best in the world. So they went to uh, David Akar, I believe, and they came up with uh, a logo and corporate identity with advice from David Akar. Ironically, the same group had an advertising agency under its fold, Mudra, and with advice from David Akar, when this, I believe it was David Akar and Jack Trout, or maybe one of them, or both of them. I'm not sure, stand to be corrected, because either of them or both of them. The internal group company Mudra, there were internal discussions informally that they could have done a much better job without advice than what has come out with advice. Now, the problem here is very interesting. Reliance ADAG was aiming to emerge as a global multinational. It wanted everything to be of global quality. It approached world's best brand management consultants. All of that is true. The difficulty is this. Brand management itself is a very wide area when you go deeper into it. And people who are very good in the area of positioning and architecture are not equally good in the area of aesthetics and are not equally good in the area of equity evaluation. So consultants who are good in brand equity evaluation are different. Those who are good in brand aesthetics are different, and those who are good in positioning and brand architecture are different. Now, this is something which a CEO of the company is not expected to know. An owner of the company is not expected to know. This kind of depth would be known only to those who themselves are extremely knowledgeable in brand management, which means they are themselves either consultants or they are academicians. A person who is working in advertising agency, even he may not know this finesse and nuance of the knowledge landscape in the area of brand management. And therefore, the promoters and the owners were not advised rightly that they should have gone to somebody like Brand Smith or somebody of that school who specializes in brand aesthetics and corporate identity, rather than who go to somebody like Jack Trout and David Akar, who specialize in positioning and brand architecture. So this is a situation where you need a consultant even to hire another consultant. A very specialized situation, that the work is so specialized that you need a consultant to help you hire a consultant, because you're looking for super specialized capabilities. One more example of, two more examples of use of management consultancy or consultants in individual capacity or firms are the Aadhaar card in India, the entire architecture and the process and the system, and National Skill Development Commission. Both of them involved individual consultants, formally, informally, consulting firms, formally, informally, to get inputs. And NSDC, I think, even involved it formally. I think Aadhaar also involved formally for some part of it. And they have come up to be great successes on a national scale of 1 billion plus people. So these are two examples where consultants or consulting firms have put in their inputs and help create something very valuable on a billion plus scale of population. We can also see in National Skill Development Commission that the moment the consultants walk out and it is left to government staff and bureaucrats, how the system starts falling down. So these are some of the good examples in the area of management consulting, where either a consultant was hired to turn something around, or a consultant was hired to study a system and find out what works, what are the conceptual foundations of the system which is competitively defeating us, or how consultants can contribute to large scale projects like Aadhaar or National Skill Development Corporation. Sorry, it's not commission, it's corporation. I'm confused, let it be as it is. NSDC. So here in this slide, we have seen some interesting cases which are a part of folklore of management consulting. Now let us look at another aspect of it, where consultants themselves have become case studies. Because consultants in individual capacity or as consulting firms did not go by ethical guidelines, and they could not practice what they preach, and the whole world said, consultant, advise thyself. 4 examples I have taken of consulting firms or individuals not being able to practice what they preach, not being able to practice ethics in management consulting, and they ended up becoming case studies themselves rather than making case studies of others. The first example is of Lehman Brothers. We all know the financial crisis 2008. How Lehman Brothers, which was considered to be a very strong investment bank with number of consultants on its payroll, how they would advise others not practice it themselves, and how Lehman Brothers went into financial loss and took the system down with them. So this is one instance of an investment banker who is also into mortgage, who is also into many other financial products and services, how it goes down despite having so many consultants. So a consulting firm who has many consultants, the best of them can also go down because ethics has nothing to do with capability. You can have a person with high ethics and no capability, or very high capability and no ethics. So we see how ethics takes down a consulting firm. Second example is of Rajat Gupta, the chairman of McKinsey Global, who was sent to prison. Although he said he was innocent, but he was sent to prison. He maintains his innocence, but most people do believe that knowingly, unknowingly, ethics was breached in an insider trading incident. The accusation was Rajat Gupta was on board of Goldman Sachs, and he got to know Warren Buffett is investing in Goldman Sachs in a few days. And he passed on this inside information to a friend of his who made a lot of money on the basis of this insider information. Merits of the case apart, the court did send him to prison for many years, and this friend also. I believe they were fined also. I'm not sure, but I heard of it. Third case is of Satyam. Used to be one of the top 5 software companies in India at one point in time. And then the owners created a new company called Mitas into infrastructure, started investing from Satyam's profits into Mitas, and started forging the books of Satyam. At that time, the consulting company for Satyam was PwC. And some members of PwC, as it appeared in the press, were found to be complicit with the top management of Satyam in misreporting of correct financial information. So here we see in Lehman Brothers, it was the entire institution that breached ethical guidelines and went down. In Rajat Gupta's case, it was individual who breached ethical guidelines. In Satyam case, it was the top management of the company along with the company's consultant PwC, or at least few of its members of PwC, that breached ethical guidelines, or PwC could not at least perform its job as it was expected to. So here, by and large, people see it as a collusion between the company top management and the consulting firm, both partners in crime in breaking the ethical guidelines. And Satyam went down and it had been taken over by some other company. Very interesting case. Someday we'll take it up. But we see here a consulting company colluding with a corrupt company management. Fourth is the case of Enron, where on a much larger scale than Satyam, unethical practices were being followed in many areas, including accounting, and the consultants played along with the company for a long time before the scandal blew over. So these are 4 cases where management consultants as individuals or as consulting firms were involved in cases where they breached ethical guidelines. They could not practice what they preach to everyone else. And they became case studies themselves for everyone to study. Now let us take some case studies which are very good for management consultants to chew upon, to develop the skills in consulting. And in that area, if somebody wants to develop skills in the area of strategy and brand management, these are some of the cases I would suggest to go over. If time permits, we'll take them up. Not today, some other day. First case is of Himalaya branding Ayurveda. And the point here is, there are 2 situations. You launch a new brand in an existing market, or you launch a brand in a way you are creating a sector, or you are creating the whole category. So creating the brand in an existing category or creating a category with a brand that you launch are 2 different things. And here, unless you brand Ayurveda, no company will make it big in the area of Ayurveda unless Ayurveda itself is sold and established as a very promising category. So the overall arcade of Ayurveda has to be marketed before individual companies and products can be marketed under that arcade. It's a market creation exercise, category creation exercise. And no company can go big unless Ayurveda is established as something that works, something one can resort to, and something which is scientific. So this is a very interesting case. A similar case is of Patanjali, where the company is partly into creating a category in Ayurveda, partly creating a category in yoga and well-being, in treatment and medicines, and partly the company is into FMCG, which is what creates a very difficult and complicated brand architecture problems. How do you create a brand architecture for a company which has one vertical in foods and beverages, one vertical in FMCG, one vertical in pharmaceuticals, one vertical in yoga, one vertical in Ayurvedic hospital. So very interesting case for management consultants to chew upon. Third interesting case is of Intel, and the case is about component branding, what is called ingredient branding or constituent branding. Most of the brands we see are of final products. If you buy a LG refrigerator, you don't know who made the compressor, although the compressor is the heart of the refrigerator. Or if you buy a fan, you don't know who made the motor, which is electric motor, which is the heart of the fan. Or you buy an AC, and the compressor of the AC is the heart of the whole thing. So it opens up an area which constituents can be branded. How can they be branded? And can a constituent brand be more strong than the final product brand? And Intel has shown it can be. Intel as a brand is a stronger brand than many of the computer brands in which Intel is used. And it opens up the whole area of brand architecture in constituent branding. In fact, there was a very interesting example. There was a company in USA which was manufacturing screws, very small screws. And they developed a very successful component brand by showing an advertisement where the roof flies away when strong winds are blowing because the screw which was holding the roof onto the panels, the screw breaks. So it brings up the criticality of the screw and how much damage a wrong screw can do, and therefore go for a high quality screw. And that is how it created a very strong component brand and sold screws at much higher price than other competing screws. So it shows practically anything can be branded if you can differentiate in tangible and intangible terms both. Fourth interesting case is on ideational consumption, how we consume ideas. Film-based merchandising, taking the movies home. Say, for example, you watch Harry Potter and then take home toys which are based upon Harry Potter, or you take home a t-shirt which has a picture of Harry Potter. Now you are paying something extra for that picture of Harry Potter because you wish to consume ideationally some ideas, some feelings related to Harry Potter, which you can consume if something visual is put on the t-shirt. So you are not only consuming the cotton t-shirt, you are also consuming ideas which occur in the consumption process by virtue of the visual on the t-shirt. So it opens up this whole area of ideational consumption, what we call the tangible value and the intangible value, how intangible value can be created and how you can do it by going in for ideational products, thematic products. Fifth case is of Titan. How Titan, a Tata Group company, started the corporatization process of the gold market in India, which was largely unorganized. And this is a very interesting case of any developing country which undergoes in any sector corporatization of an unorganized market. And what are the challenges? How much time it takes? What are the lessons from it? Very interesting case. Sixth important case is of home services, a company called Urban Clap. I think now they have changed the name. It also talks about corporatization of home services, both not only corporatization but aggregation and corporatization of home services and enabling it with technology online. It's a very interesting case study how in a developing country you can aggregate, you can corporatize, and you can use technology to provide home services which become increasingly difficult to access, partly because of availability, partly because of cost. Seventh is this whole area of spirituality, well-being, and organic food and good lifestyle. And one can go here into cases related to Ananda, which is a spa in Himalayas, or Patanjali, or spiritual schools like Isha, Sri Sri, or ISKCON. These are very good models for management consultants to study. Very different type of organizations, very different objectives, very different ways of functioning, and yet very holistic and very successful. So I would suggest these cases, please go through, read through. If you can get an analysis, better. Try to solve it themselves. Someday when we find time, we'll take them up one by one and discuss and solve them. Thank you.